Released in 2002, Panic Room was seen as something that was an easier project for Fincher, following on from Fight Club, which required hundreds of shots and hundreds of locations. Fincher saw the idea of a film shot all within one location, a locked room mystery, as being a much easier prospect, and also a chance for him to make a film that, as he saw it, that people could go on a Friday night and take a date to go and see, whereas previous films up until this point had been more complex, more involved, and certainly, while his intentions for the game had certainly been to do this sort of movie, it had once again fallen into the same category as both Seven and Fight Club, and even Alien 3 has been more complex than it probably should have been. Here with Panic Room, we see Jodie Foster and a very young Kirsten Stewart moving into their new property up in the Manhattan Upper District, discovering that it has a mysterious panic room put in by the former owner, where residents, in case of a break-in, can go and hide out in what is essentially a glorified bank vault and wait for the police to arrive. Certainly this comes in handy when three mysterious assailants break into the house. The only problem is they want what's inside the panic room. I'm Elwood.
I'm Kim.
And you're listening to Movies and Tea. Let's take it to the booth. Hello folks, and welcome to another exciting edition of Movies and Tea. Tonight we're obviously talking about Panic Room as part of our David Fincher season, and I think this is really the perfect sort of movie, since we're all locked in our own houses, to essentially look at a movie which takes place in a house. And
as we're recording this, because maybe we'll be out of confinement by the time this goes up.
Yes, exactly. Or who knows what's happening in the world today, do we? So, but you can watch this and then find inspiration for shooting your own remake, perhaps. I don't know. But Kim, I mean, this was one of the films, when we're looking at the filmography, that you were sort of most excited to talk about. Certainly for myself, we've already had a couple of those fanboy moments with both the likes of Alien 3, 7 and Fight Club, especially, and certainly more to come as we look ahead to what is to come in the season. But what is it about Panic Room that particularly appeals to yourself?
I've always been like a fan of the one room mystery concept. The one location is always such an intriguing thing, because I find that when executed well, you can make this location so memorable, and you can navigate this location really well, and just being locked in has this mystery, and has this, I guess it's not so much a mystery anymore, but but yeah, I mean, like with threat around you and all that, and how you can change from that moment, like how much it feels like it's such a small area to explore, and yet they're able to build so much out of it. And Panic Room is one of those situations where, in the hands of David Fincher, obviously, it helps so much because he's able to really give those the mystery and the thriller elements a lot of depth, and it makes it just so intriguing to watch. And obviously they're paired with some really great performances from Jodie Foster, Kristen Stewart, Jared Leto, Forrest Whitaker. The whole cast was really, really good.
Definitely so, and I mean, this is a film really suited to Fincher's sort of style and sensibilities, in particular the use of the impossible shot, which really comes into its own in this film, and certainly something that we saw introduced in the previous film, Fight Club. And Fincher's always been one of those directors who's embraced the use of modern technology and CGI, and just having the sort of freedom with the filmmaking to just shoot the films he wants and to take the camera essentially anywhere, even though it's often at the expense of the crew obviously having to work longer hours and the setups requiring more effort. But certainly when you look at Fincher's films, the amount of effort he puts into the film, it always pays off and looks great on the screen. And certainly the way he moves the camera, the way we move around this house, it just pays off in spades with how the camera work looks here. And when I look at the other directors that were attached to this, I mean, Ridley Scott was first attached to it. Forrest Whitaker was at one point going to be attached to direct the film, before it obviously fell in the hands of David Fincher. And from a sort of the cinematography sort of standpoint, I mean, how do you find it? I mean, do you find like that use of the impossible shot, the use of CGI to sort of move the camera going into these impossible places, sort of like a little sort of cliche, a little tacky, or do you think it sort of adds to the story the same way that we saw with Fight Club?
Well, I mean, David Fincher in cinematography, you can't really complain a lot about it. At least so far in the movies that we've seen in his filmography that we've looked at, he's really been able to manage the impossible shot and all those things really well. And I mean, Panic Room is really, I think the cinematography here is really great as well, because I mean, with even the CGI and all that, as he navigates around the house and with the camera, it gives the house, like, I mean, this is a big house. This is a big house. Yeah. And they give this house so much room, and you get such a good knowledge of where everything is, and that's all credit to how he shoots it and how he introduces the house and how he navigates to where everything is and what are the options that, if you remember the details and whatnot, just like the characters do, that they're able to use this to their advantage. And this all adds up to the story, and that all has to do with being able to execute the good cinematography to capture these shots. And I mean, one of the really great things about here is, I think, with cinematography, is the fact that the camera never leaves the inside of the house, except for the start of the movie when they're going to see the house and they enter it, and at the end when they have left the house. But I mean, in the middle, pretty much, even when they're doing the house tour, even when they're in the house, even when the assailants are trying to break into the house, the camera is always inside, shooting outwards. And I think that adds so much to just the way the movie is shown, and adds so much mystery as well.
Oh, fantastic. Now here we obviously see Jodie Foster stars here as Meg, a recently divorced woman who's moved into this house with her daughter Sarah, and we learn through the bits and pieces that we sort of gather that the breakdown of her marriage was the result of her husband leaving her for a younger woman, and this, basically, by them moving into the house, it's kind of a way of evening the score, the fact that it would be making good by him paying for them to move into the house, which is really beyond their means. Nobody needs a house this big for two people, but apparently they need this huge three-story house with this panic room and all these other bits and pieces. Now, the role of Meg originally was going to be played by Nicole Kidman, and she actually dropped out shortly into filming as a knee injury she suffered while shooting Moulin Rouge turned into a hairline fracture very early into shooting, and they basically had to bring in Jodie Foster to replace her. And this in turn provides its own problems, because obviously when you look at Nicole Kidman, she's all about, glamour and physicality, and when you look at Jodie Foster, you can't exactly play the character the same way. So this certainly presented some issues for Fincher, with certain scenes having to be reshot or moved around, such as the opening scene where we see Sarah and Meg. They've just moved into the house and they're having the conversation over pizza, and originally it was more about Sarah playing the adult to her mother, who her mother was going to be like this more kind of like a trophy wife who was now having to find a way in the world as the result of her husband and her payday disappearing on her. Nicole Kidman actually does turn up in the film. She has a little brief cameo as she plays the girlfriend of Meg's husband, who you can hear in the background when he first answers the phone. So
oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. And also the screenwriter for the film also turns up as the neighbor who ignores their attempts to SOS. So that's your two cameos there. But the film was actually written by David Nope. I'm not sure if it's a name that sort of stands out to yourself at all.
sounds familiar, but yet I don't know because I confuse names like these all the time. I confuse names all the time. So.
Okay, well, I mean, he's been a writer on several big projects, including Jurassic Park, Lord's Way. He directed and wrote Stir of Echoes from 1999, and he also did Lost World Jurassic Park as well. And so he's definitely a writer who's always been there. He's normally more in a co-writing sort of status rather than a sort of solo writer. I mean, there's a couple of films that he wrote solo, such as like The Shadow, and obviously Stereo Records was one of his, and Panic Room again is another of his solo efforts as well. With the relationship between, mother and daughter here, I mean, I personally really adore Jodie Foster, so the fact that she's here in the lead role, it's fantastic. I mean, Fincher originally had wanted to work with her back on The Game, where she was going to play Michael Douglas's sister in the film, but that fell through. So it was great to see Fincher and Foster working together. And it's kind of an interesting dynamic, the fact that here we have a film with 3 directors working on it, because both Jodie Foster and Forest Whitaker have directed, and obviously Fincher's obviously directing this, trying to do this thing. So it's a really interesting dynamic on set, to have like three directors working on a film. And I think it also helped in the fact that when you have someone with Fincher who wants to shoot like 70 takes of like insulin being thrown across the floor just because he knows that exact shot that he wants, there's a little more understanding than if you're just dealing with actors who don't perhaps understand why this director is showing such obsession over a single shot. But yeah, I was just really interested what you made of obviously Jodie Foster and Kristen Stewart's characters' relationship, because I thought it came across very sort of natural, and as much as I was interested to see how Kristen Stewart and Nicole Kidman's relationship would have been, I thought that the one that we get with Jodie Foster, it felt very honest and very sort of natural. It didn't feel like just 2 actors pretending to be related to each other.
Well, I definitely agree with that. I mean, I personally like Jodie Foster a lot. I've watched her in a lot of movies, a few movies where she has been somewhat of like a, maybe more of a needs to be taken care older woman, like a parent type of thing. I mean, I saw her in, she played someone like that, like in Nim's Island. Granted, she wasn't playing a mom, but she was playing like an author who was kind of very, I don't know, scared of everything around her. It was like a contrast to the books that she wrote. But I mean, in general, I think that Jodie Foster was a really good choice for this, because honestly, as much as, I mean, maybe it's because for Nicole Kidman, I would have seen her, because I've seen the others, I would have pictured her more as like a strict mom, more than like the needs to be taken care by the daughter mom, you know? Which is what this relationship is really about. It's that, she has her position, but her daughter is the one who grounds her a lot. Like Sarah will have these like snarky comments, but at the same time, she also knows like when her mom's freaking out or whatnot, and then she would kind of have these things that says it, and then it would kind of be like, it reminds Meg that she's the parent, that she has to think of something, and it makes her very proactive in the situation to kind of navigate around the room and find what needs to be done. Where when it first, like, between their interactions and stuff, you can really see that, I mean, this mother and daughter has their own dynamic that works. And I believe that they were mother and daughter. It's very, they play off of each other really well. And I think that has to do a lot with, I think it would have a lot to do with like how they structure every dialogue and interaction that they have while they're in the panic room, and how it sets up even before. I mean, the movie starts pretty quickly. Like the whole assailant moving in and then the assailants breaking in. Everything happens really quickly. So, but they still manage to use that little time and those little conversations and just even the beginning of that panic room situation to really kind of set the stage of what this relationship is and how they work with each other really well.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that when you look at how Foster's obviously playing this character of Meg, it makes a lot more sense. A lot of the smaller details, such as obviously with the fact that Sarah's diabetic. So when you have the scene where the dinner table scene and they're topping up her cola, and she's got like the mini fridge there with like the water and the insulin still in. And those are the sort of things that I could see Jodie Foster playing this character would do. Where if it was Nicole Kidman, I wouldn't see her as having such mindfulness of daughter's condition to have all these things in place. I would say she would be a lot more sort of focused on, getting things moved in, and things wouldn't be where they should be, like this early into the move, where Meg is seen as having everything pretty much under control. She's got the sort of foundation of home life already in place, even though they just moved into the property, and it just shows that sort of focus that she has, that she doesn't need the husband that she's lost. Whereas if Nicole Kidman's playing it, you get the feeling that she would be more lost without that husband figure in her life. Which would have made it really interesting, the fact that when the husband is brought into the film later, how that sort of relationship would have played. Does he seen as more of a, the shining knight, in the fact that he's coming to rescue these two women, whereas in the case of Jodie Foster's portrayal of the character, it's sort of like he's just there to provide, assistance. She's pretty much got the situation under control the best she can. She just needs that outside help to try and relieve some of the stress that they're under, really. But I certainly love her resourcefulness for someone who's sort of been thrown into the situation. You never get the feeling that she's like had any sort of like training in how to deal with the situation. She's just constantly thinking on her feet, on like adapting to the situation. It always feels very natural how she adapts to it. So there's never any sort of like leaps in logic of how she handles any of these situations at all.
Yeah, I mean, she pretty much deals with what she has on hand, and I mean, this is where I think the mother-daughter relationship really plays off each other, because in the beginning she's kind of a bit more panicked as the mother, and then you see Sarah, and she's telling her to not get worked up, but what Sarah is doing is looking through everything to see what they have and what they can use and that sort of thing. And there's this kind of organization that works between the two. Jodie Foster is able to, I don't know, Jodie Foster is really good in thrillers, I find. She has that like panicked feeling that is just the right amount to make it believable, but to get you really worked up with her. But at the same time, her character always has this strength to her that gives her this trajectory, this believable trajectory of what she's gonna do next, and what she and there's this kind of unknown factor, because at the same time she's kind of just like, just that moment where she's like tosses the fire blanket at Sarah and cover yourself, and then she's like trying to do the vent thing and blow up the and then like put the fire in there or whatnot. It was just, just that one scene was kind of like, you can tell that she was in panic, but they had to do something, and this was the only thing she could think of, even though it sounded like the craziest thing to be doing at that moment.
Oh yeah, and there's so many lines that Foster improvised, which I think is just something that comes with experience. When you look at the fact that Foster's been acting for so many years now, she was a child actor turned adult actress, so the fact she can just improv lines, and especially in terms of her character, I mean, she had 11 days to prep for the role, so she was brought in like real sort of last minute notice, because they were already shooting at the time, and they were just basically trying to work around the scenes with Meg. And then she improvised like fun little lines in here, like when she says goodnight to Sarah, and originally it was in the script as just like, I love you, and she changed it to, it's disgusting how much I love you, which I think was just really touching. And the scene when after, as you said, with the vent where she caused that huge fireball, and she looks at him, it's like, I don't want to see you ever do that again. And the fact that Kristen Stewart, I probably wasn't expecting the line, just that shock on her. He's like, what do I do? What do I do? Look on her face. But it worked perfectly, of almost as if like she was like throwing the line out there just to, cause she knew it would create that sort of panicked reaction that needed for that, the aftermath of what's happened to them. So, but Yeah, Jodie Foster didn't help situations by shortly after the film started, she got pregnant. So when you got a character who's running around essentially in a tank top for most of the film and showing signs of heavy pregnancy, it gets a little creative. So Fincher explained basically in the making of that they used her stunt double for a lot of the physical stuff, and then a lot headshot and close-ups they would shoot Jodie Foster, and then because the film's been shot in chronological order, when she's into her later states of pregnancy, that's when she starts wearing the thick jumper to hide her pregnancy. But as of the process, she did actually go on to say that, you know, if shooting had gone any longer, she was going to wear a tank top that just basically said "fuck off" across the front. But I was interested when you have an actress gets pregnant and they still, like in the middle of a season, they're having to work around it. I mean, we saw it with Gillian Anderson in the second season of The X-Files. She got pregnant and they had to keep shooting Scully's character in like big long trench coats and always holding clipboards to hide her bumps. So it's always fun how they work around these things. Now, you mentioned already, I mean, the fact that we go quite quickly into the home invasion aspect, because I mean this film, Fincher describes it as Rear Window meets Straw Dogs, though he says a lot of people probably see it as Home Alone meets Straw Dogs because they probably haven't seen Rear Window. And we've very quickly introduced to our trio of home invaders who are all stand out in their own unique ways. And before we obviously talk about them, I mean, I love the shot of when they're first introduced and they're sort of caging the outside and you see them like come to the windows, these haunting sort of spectres. And it was on this rewatch I have to wonder, like, why when we watch these films does everybody sleep with the curtains open? Nobody ever draws the curtains when they go to sleep.
It's very weird. It's very weird because I don't know. I don't know because I've only started drawing the curtains after I got married because my husband's really into drawing the curtains when he sleeps. Like, he needs a dark room. But for myself, I don't really care. I actually like light coming in. I just don't like the fact that if you were in a house like that, then like at least the ground floors, the curtains would have been closed.
Yeah.
Right? And I don't know. I mean, it's one of those questions that you can... Well, you can also say that they just moved in and they didn't install the curtains yet.
Yes, you could.
I mean, they barely installed the phone, so you know.
I just for myself, I don't like looking out the window when it's dark out there. It messes with my mind too much. So I couldn't have bloody window and curtains open and stuff. It just dawned on me. It's like, why has nobody got the curtains open? And when you look at the guy who lives across from them, he only draws his blinds when they've been and pissed him off with the bloody flashlight. But yeah, our trio of home invaders here. I mean, we obviously got Forrest Whitaker as the blue-collar tech, should we say, who is Panic Room and knows exactly what's hidden inside it. We've also got Jared Leto here playing... How would you describe Junior exactly? Because he's basically... First of all, he's a white guy with cornrows, which is always a tragic look. And he's a bit high-strung, to say the least. So he's kind of an interesting go-between between obviously the calm nature of Forrest Whitaker's Burnham, and then on the other hand you've also got Dwight Yoakam's psychopath Raoul, who spends the great deal of the film in a balaclava, because that of course doesn't raise any suspicion when you're caging someone's house, does it?
Jared Leto he's kind of like two-folds, right? On one hand, he's kind of like the mastermind behind it, but at the same time, he has more, like, he's the one that has the most knowledge about what's in the Panic Room, because he's the previous owner's grandson, who kind of wants to take all the money before the inheritance is announced or something, I think. Yeah, so I mean, he kind of plays like the boss, right? He wants people to listen to him, he wants to be the leader, and that's why he also recruits He also recruits Raoul, who is a hitman, essentially. He does all the... He's more kind of like the character which does all the fighting and all the rough work and all that stuff.
Yeah, Raoul's he's introduced as apparently the specialist. And the fact that he's sort of further backed up is like, who's this guy? And he's like, I'm Raoul. And that's all he says. He's not like any of like what he's done previously. He's just, he's Raoul. But we obviously find out a bit later that perhaps he's not quite the person he's portraying himself to be. The character Raoul is actually played by country music star David Dwight Yoakam. I don't know if he sells any records in your town, but originally it was actually going to go to the lead singer Tool, but due to scheduling conflicts, it actually went to Yoakam, who'd done some acting before. I believe he was in Sing Blade. But he's obviously done some acting bits and pieces before, but this is certainly a very memorable role, even if he spends a great deal of the film with his face covered in this balaclava. But I think it really sort of pays off all the more because he's responsible for giving us our face of evil shot towards the end, when we get to see just how truly nasty he is. But it's an interesting dynamic that we got between the three characters. I mean, Raoul was originally going to be a part of Forrest Whitaker because he was supposed to be like this big hulking guy, and because Forrest Whitaker was more attracted to the character Burnham, Fincher changed it so that he was more of a wiry ex-con style character, which I think works out better in the long run, especially when you get to see what's under the mask. And I think Yoakam's really got a face for this sort of character, especially one that he contorts really, really well when the more evil he gets. But I mean, when I look at the characters, it feels like you got Raoul, who's sort of like the more psychotic, the more quick to violence and more extreme methods, and then you got Burnham, who's more sort of reserved, quiet, and he's more logical in his approach. And then we've obviously got in between, we've got Junior, who seems to be it almost seems like these other two characters are like his conscience, and he's constantly going back and forth, which side am I supposed to listen to? Do I stick with Burnham's plan because he's the expert and knows that what the best way to do it, or do I go with Raoul's methods, who's sort of more direct and thinks that things can be done with brute force often, such as the fact that if we can't go through the front door, we'll just go up through the floor, not taking into account the fact is essentially a vault built into a house, so it's steel floors and walls and everything. So, but I mean, how did you find these characters in particular? I mean, do they sort of stand out to yourself, or how did they sort of vibe with you?
Well, I mean, it's hard for the three assailants to not stand out, I think, mostly because the movie only has 5-6 characters that we're dealing with, and a good portion of it we're watching their side of the story, and then we're watching the mother and daughter in the inside, and slowly the situation becomes really apparent with the three assailants that honestly they're only together a one-time deal on this job, so they have not too much chemistry, I guess, with each other, coordination, cooperation. Everybody seems to be on their own side, right? I mean, Forrest Whitaker's character Burnham is there as the expert. He's quiet. The only reason he joined this was because the house was supposed to be empty, and they were gonna go in and come out with no one hurt, nothing happening, and it would just be a quick job. It will be an easy job that he can use. Because he can use that money for his own purpose. But at the same time, like you said, Jared Leto is more Junior's the kind of middle character. He wants the money. He's hiding some of the facts, but at the same time, he also doesn't have the smarts of Burnham. But also he doesn't have the psychotic, I guess, the viciousness of Raoul's character. So he's kind of somewhat useless in the whole situation because he's trying to be the leader, but he really isn't. He's constantly being led by someone else. Like Burnham ends up taking like finding a solution to the problems that they can't seem to solve in whatever way. Or, you know, Raoul will have his own way to deal with it, and he can't control him, even though he thinks that he can. And this constant dynamic that they have, and this whole arguing and all those things, is the reason that their lack of, I guess, just coordination and cooperation gives the story this extra. They end up having these like open window time where the like Jodie Foster's character can do things, can execute certain things that she's trying to do, like go get her cell phone or you know run out of the room or whatever they have to achieve.
Yeah, it's. I mean, the character. I mean, with Junior, I always every time I like look at his character, he's just like someone who's trying to be a tough guy, but he's really not. So we see him like with the cornrows, and he's got this sort of like, you know, rap star gangster swagger to him. And you see how quickly when the situations go south, how he's like he's all constantly out the door. As soon as they hit a setback, he's like, oh, first one always out the door, and then someone like clawing back by saying, you know, we can go this other way. And it's just really interesting when you see like when they first like starting out, and the fact that when they hit that first sort of roadblock with, you know, Meg and Sarah dashing into the panic room, the one room they don't want them to be in. That he's sort of like pretty much ready to go, and then he's sort of like Raoul's sort of directness of like just basically pick up the sledge and start smashing things up, sort of holds his attention, where Burnham just goes off and he's like he figures out his own sort of plan of using the gas cylinder. And to this extent, I think this is the one sort of evil move that Burnham has in the film, which makes him a kind of like a probably dubious sort of character, because he's seen as, you know, as you said, he's just this guy who's been drawn into this situation. He didn't want anyone to get hurt because he didn't think anyone's going to be at the property, so he was just there to handle the technical side and to break into the vault and whatnot. But then we have that moment with the gas cylinder where he's the one who comes up with the idea of gassing the panic room, which is kind of dark.
It is dark, but I think that at the same time, his purpose is that he didn't expect that they would stay inside the room. He just wanted to gas them out.
Yeah, for sure.
And while the thought is dark, I mean, it just didn't turn out the way that he expected, because they reacted in a much more extreme way than he expected them to just take the easy way out and just, you know, literally get out of the panic room so that they would be able to, I don't know, restrain them and just go in and do whatever they have to do.
Yeah, and it's certainly his character's path over the course of the film, just like these moral lines that he's constantly forcing to sort of cross, and you think, well, how far is this guy willing to go? It's like, at what point does he just, you know, give up on this idea? Because I have to say, he's more dedicated than I would have thought for someone who's been drawn into this situation. I would have thought that after the fact that they almost get blown up with a gas cylinder, I thought that would have been enough to just, like, you know, call it a day and just like, I'm out of here. But for some reason, he constantly sticks with it. He's constantly working on trying to figure out ways to like counter the security measures within the panic room and to find a way to get into the room. And we also see him at the same time, even though he's going further and further into this sort of like criminal line, that he still has these redeeming moments, such as the fact he gives Sarah insulin, and he shows real sort of compassion to almost like protecting her from Raoul. And the fact that he chooses to go back at the end, he has these sort of like redeeming sort of moments around him, which makes him a very interesting sort of character to look at, and certainly one whose journey is probably the most interesting of the characters in the film, whereas everyone else has sort of very sort of set courses. His seems to like take the most sort of turns as we go.
Yeah, and you know, I think, you know, I mean, I think you really you got it there. I mean, in that sense that like, Forrest Whitaker does a great job at this. I mean, Forrest Whitaker by himself, I think he's super underrated as an actor, and I mean, he's done some incredible roles, and he's probably in more things than I can remember sometimes. And I mean, this is one of the roles that he really nails. Because like you said, I mean, Burnham, it kind of like straddles the gray area of the character, where you kind of like, you don't really hate him as the assailant, but at the same time, I mean, he's not a bad person in reality. He's doing this because he desperately needs the money. So why he goes back is because the father in him that's doing it for his child is telling him that he doesn't want Sarah to get hurt, or doesn't want any of these doesn't want anything bad to happen. So as much as he wants to do this as much as he's doing this because he needs the money for his own family, he's also doing this because he also goes back to kind of, I guess, save the situation a little by also like being okay with it, like kind of making up for the fact that he's caused so much pain to the mother and daughter in this whole situation.
Oh, for sure. There's something that I did obviously forget to mention about Junior. I mean, this is the second time that Fincher's brutalized Jared Leto. He got his face reduced to hamburger meat in Fight Club, and here we get to see him have his face burnt off, essentially, with a propane explosion. Fincher did cite that the fact that Leto kept constantly making these like top 50 most beautiful people in the world lists, that he thought it amused him, the idea of just constantly brutalizing his characters in films. So that's why he did really push for Leto's character to be to get burnt and then shot in the head twice, because he says he's like, look at that face, don't you think it would look beautiful to shoot it in the head? I was surprised really of Junior's sudden exit from the film when it happens. I think it's a real sort of turning point, and I mean, the fact that Raoul shows this moment of violence and suddenly kills Junior, do you think that this is one of the reasons that Burnham sort of stays on the job? This idea, this sense of danger he senses from Raoul, and he knows that if he leaves him with these people, God knows what's going to happen to them as a result of that, and that by staying on the job and seeing it through, that he's maintaining some sort of control and in some indirect way looking after the lives of Sarah and Meg.
I'm not sure if it's that, I don't know, selfless. I think it's more for the fact that if Raoul can kill Junior over him leaving, then he could equally do the same thing to himself, and he needs to survive this in order to get out, even if it's without. I mean, I
wasn't sure that like Raoul killed Junior just because he was leaving. I mean, we have the scene before that where he basically says, "He's like, I know who you are, Raoul. You drive a bus. You ain't this person you're saying you are." And that Raoul, like, after he kills him, he says that he's like, he knew too much about me, which it's very, at times it's hard to understand what Raoul's mentality is. It constantly seems very direct and sort of focused on getting to inside the room by any means possible. He's got very low moral sort of sense about, gassing Meg and Sarah. I mean, the fact that it has to be pointed out to him, the fact that if he gasses them out, that they die, then they ain't going to be able to get into the panic room anyway. So he constantly has to be pointed out to him and drawn back from just being sort of let off his leash constantly to just do what he wants. So
yeah, well, I mean, Raoul is kind of like he's the wild card, right? And he's also the twist factor in the whole in Panic Room, pretty much. I mean, just from you had talked before about him shooting Jared Leto, and then because he shoots that character, he ends up having kind of a more, I guess the power changes a little in that moment. And it's unexpected because while you see that Raul is getting slowly kind of more and more, a bit more crazier and a bit more intense in the decisions that he does and the actions that he chooses to take, you never quite expect him to do this, because what would be the end game for him in this sense, right? Like, where would Burnham's loyalty stand in that sense? Like, I think that Raul's character is really that sort of character that David Fincher likes to work with, where it's kind of your unknown factor. The audience doesn't know when Raul is going to change or what he'll do in the end and when he'll reveal himself, pretty much, because his face is covered the entire time. We don't know who he is. We only hear his voice, and then we have all these little hints of him being very unhinged in his decision and not afraid to make kind of like the more extreme choices. So much that it doesn't seem like he really cares about the consequences of his actions as much as the other two will more like Burnham will analyze the situation, because he really knows what he wants out of the situation. But I think that's what gives Raul's character a lot more substance, because what builds for his character is really the second half, where you start seeing a lot more of his true nature come out.
Oh, definitely so. And I think when this film first came out, I think one of the two talking points of the film was the character Raul, this guy in the balaclava, and who is just like, and just the way he sort of like carried himself. And the other big talking point was the fact that everyone mistook Kristen Stewart for being a boy, because she's got a very androgynous haircut, which I think they cut it a little too short. So it didn't do any favors in the fact that it made her look like a young boy throughout the film. So, as a film, I think Panic Room is a film that really stands out. It's not as complex as some of his other films in the filmography. I think it's, due to its concept, it's a lot more simple, but at the same time, it's very effective, and I think it's one that we've kind of forgotten about as Fincher's obviously gone in his career and gone on to craft bigger and more sort of elaborate films, that we've kind of forgotten about Panic Room for some reason. And I think the fact that it didn't have the sort of scandal around its production that Alien 3 had, and obviously the fact it wasn't part of a big franchise there, or much like The Game, it's not got the sort of parts in place to make it the same sort of cult classic that something like Fight Club or Seven is, where you can just sort of like constantly look at the many different elements to the film. It's all, with both The Game and Panic Room, it feels very much like what we get is always sort of presented to us. There's no real big mystery here. It's just the real enjoyment is just in how the story is told and how it's shot and how it plays out. But further viewing, if you do obviously like Panic Room, what would you recommend watching with it?
I mean, right off the bat, I think that on a much smaller scale of a one location, I would choose something like Phone Booth.
Oh, good choice.
Yeah. That was released in the same year, 2002.
Joe Schumacher.
2002, 2003, something like that. Yeah, so, I mean, this one is obviously with Colin Farrell, and he's this publicist that finds himself trapped inside a phone booth and he's on the phone with some guy and he's trying to figure out why he's being caught there, why they won't let him, go for help or leave this, and the movie really takes a height in this one, and I think that Phone Booth really is a really thrilling adventure. I think it's one of the first one location movies that I watched. That really got me into this one location concept. The second one is more recent. It would be 2016's Don't Breathe. Also one location in a house, but it's more of a reverse situation because pretty much the three people that are breaking into the house end up being hunted by the owner of the house. So, if you watch, I think this actually works really well because it's kind of like you watch one situation and then the other situation. Anyways, that's my two choices. How about you?
Yeah, it's very good approach. I mean, I was also good like yourself. I was going to go with Don't Breathe. I mean, I like you said, it's really fun the fact that with this film we're obviously seeing it from the people breaking into the house, and then with Don't Breathe we're following the people who are doing the breaking in, putting it in that same sort of category as the people under the stairs. And obviously the big twist with Don't Breathe is the fact you got this blind guy who's perhaps not as enable as we might think, and I think it was only really the ending that kind of let it down, and the fact that it opens with a key shot from the ending that I didn't really like about that film. And certainly the lead actress who's in Zoe's Infinite Playlist, whose name I can never remember, is really good in it as well.
Jane
Levy, yes, who I think was also in the Evil Dead remake as well, which she was really good in. So
yeah.
As for more sort of one location films, first one I want to pick is another Jodie Foster movie, and that's Flight Plan.
Okay.
It's all set on a plane, and basically she plays a mother who's traveling with her child, and she falls asleep and finds that her child has somehow disappeared on the plane, and she has to try and find out what's happened to her daughter. And it's a real interesting sort of mystery. I think it perhaps goes a little far-fetched in places, but I mean, here we are dealing with a film taking place on a plane. You've got to have a little bit of flexibility to make a story work in that sort of location. The other one that I want to go with, again, another Jodie Foster movie here, is Inside Man, with Clive Owen heading up a team of bank robbers who are breaking into a bank vault and basically instigate a standoff with Denzel Washington's negotiator. This one's got a really, really good twist in it, so it's definitely one worth checking out for that. And it's kind of a bit of a departure for Spike Lee from his usual sort of fare, so it's kind of interesting to see doing a thriller, especially a very Fincher-esque self thriller in many ways. I think if Spike Lee was to direct a Fincher movie, I think Inside Man would be as close as we're going to get to that. So those would be the two films that I would sort of pair with this one. Obviously there are other sort of like, my mind was like trying to think of like films where people are trying to escape from like from a room, you know, things like Cube and Fermat's Theorem, and maybe even like Escape Room, you know, the good one.
Yeah.
Not the crappy one that was released the same year as the good one. But yeah, those would be certainly my ones. Phone Bill especially is a really good one, and a film that I really need to revisit. I remember it being really great, and the fact that Kiefer Sutherland's just got the best creepy voice for that.
Yes.
So yeah. But that's it for obviously this episode. Thank you as always for listening, and if you make sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons wherever you happen to be listening. You can also follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and we're also on Instagram as well. And maybe leave us a review. Let us know what you think of the show, as it all helps raise the profile of the show. You can check out our full archive at moviesandteapodcast.wordpress.com. We're complete with all our previous seasons, all the Shark Weeks, all our Friday film clubs, where every Friday myself and Kim both pick a film to put together into one crazy ass double feature for you to enjoy. And we've also got some other bits of fun writing and reviews on there as well, so plenty to enjoy. But Kim, where are we going next?
Well, we're moving 5 years later to 2007, where we're going to be looking at David Fincher's next film, Zodiac.
Yeah, Zodiac, the hunt for the ever-elusive Zodiac killer, sees us move obviously to San Francisco, 1970s. A film very critically acclaimed, but one that I'm kind of keen to revisit, because it was kind of not one that sort of sat with myself. I don't know about yourself, Kim. Have you seen Zodiac before?
I think I saw half of it, and then I didn't finish it.
So make sure you join us next time for re-evaluations and Kim being forced to watch the rest of the movie. But that's all to join. But thank you as well for listening. Thank you to my co-host Kim, and we'll be back next time to talk about Zodiac. Good night.